Okay, so welcome back. We're going to go ahead and take a look at part two now. So we've been working through this week three lesson, and we're looking again at importing data. So last time we defined our paths. We imported the data using pandas. We did some cleaning of the data so that we could end up with our final data set that we can start to then look at and manipulate. So we're going to go ahead and do that and pick up with the analysis now. So with analysis, there's some typical things that you like to do. There's sorting and slicing. It means slicing is taking parts of that data frame. We'd like to do some math on the columns, maybe combining columns and then adding a new column. And then we'd like to do some, perhaps some plots, or maybe even start fitting some of the data. So let's go ahead and go through that. All right, so first thing we'd like to do perhaps is to sort our data frame. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the data frame from the last step. So here it is. And I'm going to sort by the number of faculty in the department. Okay. And so the command for that is sort values. So I'm going to take my data frame. So far it's still just called DF. And I'm going to sort that by the values in the column called num faculty. Okay, so I'm just telling it to go ahead and do that. And also, when it does that sorting, it would keep the indices for those columns. It would move those around with the row because it's kind of attached to the row. So I'm also going to go ahead and reset the index and drop the old index, okay, like we did before. So that's going to be my sorting. So there it is. You can see the number of faculty. I've got zeros. You can see the sorting all the way up to ECE, which has 83 faculty at the time I pulled this data set from the VT site. All right, now this I've called my schedule data, so SCH data. So I'm not using the DF anymore. And I do that because now as I start analyzing it, I may start changing things. So I always want to be able to easily go back to my cleaned data if I need to manipulate it in a different way. So, all right, so that's my new data. Okay, same as before, just sort it by faculty. So that's your sorting. You can sort by whichever columns you want. You can also give it more than one column here, and it'll sort by the first column, then sort by the next column. When you do that, you'll have to do it with as a list. Let me just make sure that this is going to work before I tell you that. But let's go and let's see if we sort by number of faculty and then department. Let's see. So in terms of these zeros, BC, yeah, those are already kind of, well, let's see what happens. It's posted. Okay, so the number of faculty all being 0 here, you can see it actually takes the numbers as being alphabetically coming before the letters. So those were moved to the top, and then you've got the B, C, E, so those are all in sorted order. And I don't think we have any others that are the same. Okay, so that's how you can go ahead and sort by more than one column. All right, so I'll go ahead and leave that sort in there. That won't hurt anything. So that's our sorted. And let's see. So we don't need lines 0 to 4 anymore. So we're going to remove these because there's no faculty listed in this VT data set. Anyway, it's not to say they don't have faculty, but they're not listed. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those. All right, so one way I could do is I could drop 0 to 4. That would work. Or I could just simply take the data that I want instead. So this is more like a slice. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to tell it that my new data frame of scheduled data is going to be my old one, and I'm simply going to take rows 5 to 15. I shouldn't say rows, I should say indices row indices 5 to 15. So there it is. Okay. And one of the things that you notice here is I told it to go 5 to 15, and it looks like it went 5 to 14. So what's happening there? So the problem is that many times in Python, this last number is not inclusive. So it means take index 5 up to 15, but not including 15. Okay, so if I want to take all those up down to 15, I'm going to need to make this 16, and there we go. All right, so now we've included ECE in here. Okay, all right. Now the next thing I can do is I can go ahead and reset my index again. I could have done that up here, just added it on, but it's all right. We'll reset that index. All right, if I want to just take a look at a given column, all I have to do is give it my data frame name, and then I can just pass it the name of the column, and I get the data out. So you can see the index is showing as well as the data that exists in that one column. We have to be careful when we use it like this, because we've now gone from a data frame into a series of data. This is no longer a data frame. You can just see by the formatting. And so that'll change the way that we would have to deal with this a little bit. So generally I like to leave it as data frames. So then we're going to do is we're going to take the total credit hours here. Okay, so this is the total credit hours. And we're going to go ahead and divide that by the total number of faculty. And that way we can see the total credit hours taught per faculty member in these different departments. And I want to add that as another column. So this is how I would do it. So I've got my data frame name. I'm going to give it a column name. Now in this case, this column name doesn't exist. Okay, so it's going to create it. That's the credit per faculty. Okay. And this is going to be, I'm going to tell it, go ahead and take the column total. So that's the total credits taught, and divide that by the number of faculty. Okay, so my data frame name, the column, data frame name column. And so I could just do this. See, the nice thing about this Pandas data frame is I don't need to make any kind of loop to go through and grab the data one by one through columns. I can simply tell it, take this column, divide by that column. And so this really helps to make the coding much, much simpler when dealing with spreadsheets. So there it is. So it'll divide it and put that into a new column called credit faculty. And there you go. So you can see this student credit hour per faculty number that was here. That's all that actually was just the total divided by the number of faculty. So all we ended up doing was just reproducing that column again. All right. So let's go ahead and plot it now and take a look and see what that does for us. So we're going to use matplotlib pyplot. And remember, when we imported that, we imported it as PLT. So this PLT is a shortcut. So rather than have to type matplotlib.pyplot.plot, I can just do plt.plot. And this is a convention that gets used in Python. So you should use that, call it in as PLT, and it will help you read other people's codes, because this is what everyone uses. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and use in pyplot, there's a function called plot, and what I need to do with plot is just simply give it my x values, and then comma, I give it my y values, and then I can give it some formatting commands. So we'll talk about that in a second. So my x data is just the number of faculty. Okay, so my data frame column number of faculty, and then I'm going to take again my data frame, and I'm going to take the column the credit faculty that we just calculated, and that'll be my y values. Okay, so I give it a column, then another column, and then as text, I've got RO. The R here stands for red, and the O stands for points. So as we go through, we'll look at some other codes. But if you want this to become black points instead of red points, then let me first run this. I didn't run this one. There we go. Okay, the black one is actually K. Okay. And you might be saying, well, why wasn't it blue? Well, because, I mean, why wasn't it B? Well, B stands for blue. Okay, so K is the odd one, but that means black. Right, I'm going to put it back to red. And then we could do things like we could label the X and Y axes. So this will be a common thing to do. So again, we just call plot, and then we do our function Y label. And so that's our Y label, our X label, and then we can show it. And I'll show you later, but we could use Greek letters and other things in our labels as well. All right. So if we take a look at this data, it does look like there's some linear trend here, at least early on, with the number of faculty in a department versus the credit hours taught per faculty. And then maybe it's just kind of a scatter. Let's see what this trend looks like. So looks like maybe for the number of faculty less than 30. All right, so we could certainly take a look at our original data set here, and we could see that rows 0 through 4 all have the faculty less than 30 because we sorted by the number of faculty, so this makes it nice and easy. And so we could just simply take 0 to 4 as our new data set. But what I'd like to show you is how to test the data. So maybe I have thousands of rows, and I'm looking at something maybe more complicated that is not in the sorted column, and so I want to be able to run through it and test, and then just grab those rows where the test is true. So I'm going to do it by that method. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to tell it to take a look at the column number of faculty, and then we're just going to test when that column is less than 30. And it's as simple as that. Let me show you what this command actually gives as an output. So here I'm going to, here's my S. I'm going to take this column. First, let me just do that part. Okay, there's my column. That's what that does. Right? And I'm just going to say less than 30. So it's going to tell me, it's going to test each of these and tell me whether it's less than 30 or not. Okay. And so there's my output. So it doesn't grab the ones that are less than 30, just simply tests them all. So true, 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 false, 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 false. And so if I take this format here, true and falses, okay, and put it into now this back into, so I'm going to grab this, right? That's my set of true, 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 false, 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 and put that back into my data frame. Then what this test basically goes through and says is true means keep that row, keep that row, keep that row, drop that row, drop that row. And so that's how that works. And so we can do a simple test and then put that back in to our data frame, and it'll just pull off the rows where that is true. So that's a really nice way to do that. And you could have this test be as complicated as you want. You can use the and, the ampersand, and we could put in another condition. Okay. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and do that. Let's say I'm going to copy this, save me just a little bit of typing. And I'm going to say, let's grab the, I don't know, let's say total. Okay, and so I want the number of faculty less than 30, and I also want to make sure that maybe the total is greater than 4,000. So I should just be grabbing these two now. All right, when I've got more than one condition in here, I need to make sure that I use parentheses to group them. Okay, there we go. And so the and is a logical connection. So if this one has a true in the first and that one has a true in the first, it gives a true. If one is true, then false, then it gives you false. And so that's what that is. So I can take this now and put that in here. That's my new condition. And there I go. So that's how we do these. We just keep adding them on. It's pretty nice. All right, so let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to call this my test. Make things a little easier to read than kind of nesting it all in there. So my test is number of faculty less than 30, and then I'll put that answer back in here, and that'll be my slice. I'm going to call my new data set frame here slice. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and plot that slice just like before. The number of faculty, Y is the credit per faculty, and red points. Okay, so that's just the initial part here, the linear part of our data set. Okay, so we're getting a little long. I'm going to pause here and then come back in part 3. We'll pick up and look at the curve fitting.